The sun rose slowly over Gaza, touching the broken rooftops with a soft golden light. The air was quiet, except for the sound of the wind slipping through cracked walls and shattered windows. Inside one small house at the edge of the street, two 8-year-old twins, Youssef and Sami, woke up on an old mattress. The room around them was half destroyed. The paint was peeling. The floor was covered in dust and part of the ceiling had fallen down months ago. But this was still their home, the only place left that held memories of peace. The twins looked almost the same. Thin faces, dark, curly hair, big eyes full of questions. Yet their hearts carried different kinds of silence. Youssef was the quiet one who liked to watch the light move across the walls. Sami was restless, always asking, "Do you think school will open again? Or will we hear music today?" They had not gone to school for a long time, but they still spoke as if tomorrow might be different. Their mother, tired but gentle, moved around the kitchen corner, which was now just a table with 2 plates and a small pot. She warmed some tea over a weak fire and smiled at them. "Good morning, my boys," she said softly, her voice calm even when everything else around them felt broken. The twins sat close together, sharing one piece of flat bread. They ate slowly, listening to the strange mix of sounds outside, a dog barking far away, a cart rolling over stones, and once in a while, the echo of something that reminded them of fear. When they finished eating, Youssef looked toward the corner of the room where a big piece of furniture stood under a torn blanket. He whispered, "The piano." It had belonged to their father, who used to fill their home with music every night. Before the war, he would sit on the wooden stool, smile, and play songs that made the boys laugh and dance. Sometimes he let them press the keys with their small fingers. "Every key is a voice," he used to say. "When you put them together, they tell a story." But now the piano was silent, just like him. He was gone, taken by the war, and the music had gone with him. Sami walked closer to the piano and lifted the blanket carefully. Dust flew up like gray smoke. The brown wood had scratches all over it, and one of the legs leaned slightly to the side. A few white keys were missing, and the rest looked yellow. Still, even in its broken state, it seemed to hold something alive. A memory, a sound waiting to be heard again. Sami touched one key, but he didn't press it. "Do you think it still works?" he asked. Youssef didn't answer. He just looked at the piano as if it might start playing on its own. Outside, the morning light grew stronger. Through the broken window, they could see what was left of their neighborhood. Houses without roofs, walls marked by holes, the street filled with pieces of what used to be lives. But in that quiet, there was also a strange kind of peace. A bird landed near the window frame, singing softly, and for a second, the twins forgot everything else. "It sounds like one of Baba's songs," Sami said with a small smile. Youssef nodded, his eyes bright for the first time in days. Their mother came to the doorway and watched them. She didn't say anything, but she knew what they were thinking. She remembered how her husband's music had once brought joy to their evenings, how the twins would fall asleep to the sound of his piano. She wished she could give them that again. Instead, she said quietly, "If you listen carefully, maybe you can still hear it." The boys closed their eyes. The room seemed to breathe. The wind outside touched the piano strings through the cracks, and a faint metallic hum floated through the air. It wasn't a real melody, but it was enough to make their hearts stir. Youssef whispered, "It's still here." Sami opened his eyes and smiled. "Then we can play it again." The rest of the morning passed slowly. The twins helped their mother clean the small space, picking up broken glass and sweeping away the dust. Every few minutes they looked back at the piano. It seemed to be waiting for them, like an old friend who hadn't spoken in a long time. When they were done, Youssef sat down on the stool, his legs too short to reach the floor. Sami stood beside him, watching closely. Youssef hesitated, then pressed one key. A weak but clear sound came out, and it cracked, trembling but real. They both froze, staring at each other with wide eyes. Sami laughed, a small, surprised laugh that echoed in the quiet room. "It still sings," he said. Their mother turned toward the sound, her eyes filling with tears she didn't want them to see. She leaned against the wall, listening to the tiny broken notes. Each one carried a piece of memory, of a time when the world was softer and full of laughter. For the twins, it was the first time they had felt joy since everything changed. The music was imperfect, but it was theirs. As the sun climbed higher, the boys continued to tap the keys, discovering which one still worked. Some made strange sounds, others none at all, but together they began to form a rhythm. They didn't know what song they were playing. It came from their hearts, not from memory. Outside, a few children stopped and peered through the window, curious about the sound. For a few minutes, the ruins were filled with something new, the sound of hope. By the time the day warmed, Youssef and Sami were still sitting at the piano, their small fingers moving with determination. The war had taken almost everything from them, but in that quiet morning they found something that could not be taken, the courage to bring back the music. And as the last note faded into the air, it carried a promise only they could understand, that even in silence, a song could survive. The days in Gaza were long and heavy, but inside that broken home, there was one thing that still felt alive, the memory of their father. Youssef and Sami remembered him not as a man of many words, but as a man whose hands could speak through music. Every evening before the war had turned their world upside down, he would sit by the piano with a gentle smile. His fingers would move across the keys like they were made of light. The boys would sit beside him, one on each side, watching in awe as sound filled every corner of their small home. Their father used to say, "Music can make sadness sleep." They never fully understood what he meant back then, but now, after everything that had happened, they did. Every note he played had been like a blanket of warmth, wrapping around them during dark nights when bombs fell far away and the sky lit up with fire. He played to protect them from fear, from silence, from the truth of the world outside. Before the war, their home was small but bright. The walls were covered with drawings, some by their mother, some by them. The piano stood near the window, where sunlight danced across its polished surface. On weekends, their father would teach them how to play simple tunes. "Start with your right hand," he'd say patiently, guiding Youssef's fingers, "and let your heart follow." Sami would clap along, laughing whenever his brother pressed the wrong note. Their mother would hum softly while cooking nearby, her voice blending perfectly with the piano. Those were the sounds of safety, the sounds that built their childhood. Then one day the music stopped. The air changed first. It became filled with fear and dust instead of laughter. One night, when the explosions were too close, their father told them to stay under the table. He kissed their foreheads, promising to check on the neighbors. They never saw him again. When the morning came, only his piano remained, silent but still standing. After that day, the twins could no longer bear to look at it. It was like the piano had turned into a ghost, a reminder of what they lost. Their mother covered it with a blanket and said, "Maybe one day we'll hear it again." But none of them had the courage to touch it for a long time. Still, the piano had its own way of speaking. Sometimes, when the wind blew hard, it would slip through the cracks in the broken window and brush against the strings inside. The sound was faint, like a sigh or a whisper. It reminded them of their father's humming. Youssef often froze when he heard it. It was as if the piano was calling out, saying, "I'm still here. He's still here." Every night before sleeping, Sami would ask questions that no one could answer. "Do you think Baba can hear us? Do you think he still plays somewhere?" Youssef never replied, but in his dreams he always saw his father sitting at the piano, smiling quietly, waiting for him to join. Sometimes he woke up with tears he couldn't explain. One evening, as the sky turned orange with dust and sunset, Youssef sat near the piano again. He stared at the covered shape and said softly, "If we play, maybe he'll know we remember him." Sami looked surprised, then nodded slowly. "He used to say music never dies, right?" Youssef didn't answer, but his eyes glistened. The twins pulled off the dusty blanket. Beneath it, the piano looked wounded, chipped, dull, and sad. But the more they looked at it, the more they could almost see their father there, sitting as he always did, his head bent slightly as his fingers danced across the keys. Youssef sat on the stool, the same one his father used. It was a little too high for him, just as it had been years ago. Sami stood beside him, clutching the edge. They stayed silent for a long time, as if afraid the piano might break if they touched it. Then Youssef reached out and pressed a single key. A weak trembling sound escaped, not clear but alive. The boys froze. "That one's still working," Sami whispered. Youssef tried another and another. Some keys, made dull thuds, others sang softly. Together they built a melody that wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. As they played, memories rushed back. Their father's laughter, his voice saying, "Every song has a soul." Their mother came into the room and stopped in the doorway. Her heart ached at the sight. The same small hands that once played beside their father were now pressing those broken keys. For a moment she closed her eyes and felt as if time had folded, bringing him back through their music. When the boys looked up at her, she smiled faintly through tears. "He would be proud," she said. "You kept his music alive." The twins didn't answer. They didn't need to. They kept playing, letting the sounds fill the cracks in the walls, letting them reach beyond the house. The melody drifted out through the broken window into the evening air. A few neighbors stopped outside listening. Someone whispered, "That's the teacher's piano." Another said, "His sons are playing again." That night, for the first time in many months, the neighborhood wasn't just quiet, it was listening. As the stars came out, Youssef and Sami sat side by side on the wooden stool, their shoulders touching. The piano's sound mixed with the night breeze, carrying a message only they could understand. It wasn't just music. It was a conversation between past and present, between a father who was gone and two sons who refused to forget. In that moment, the twins learned something new, that love doesn't end with silence. It echoes, it lingers in every broken note, every memory, every heartbeat, and as long as they kept playing, their father's voice would never fade. The war could take their walls, their comfort, their sleep, but not the music, not the echoes of their father. The morning light slipped through the shattered window, spreading a soft golden glow over the dusty piano. Youssef and Sami stood beside it, staring as if it were a sleeping giant. The night before, they had dared to play a few notes, and the sound had awakened something inside them, a memory, a heartbeat. Now the piano no longer looked like a ghost of the past. It looked like a challenge waiting to be brought back to life. Sami ran his hand across the top, brushing away the thin layer of dust that had gathered there. "It's so old now," he said quietly. "But it's still here," Youssef nodded. "Like us." They decided that morning they would try to fix it. They didn't know how to repair a piano. How could two 8-year-old boys know such things? But they knew one truth. Their father had loved it, and if they could make it sing again, maybe it would feel like having him close once more. They started carefully. Sami found a small cloth and began wiping each key one by one. Some were white, some yellowed with age, and others missing completely. When he pressed one key, it made a faint clicking sound. Another gave no sound at all. He frowned. "This one's broken," he said. Youssef leaned closer and pressed a few more. Out of all the keys, only half made any kind of noise, and even those sounded uneven, like whispers in a storm. "We'll make it better," Youssef said, his voice firm but soft. They opened the top of the piano the way they had seen their father do. Inside was a strange world, rows of strings, hammers, and wood, all tangled with dust and cobwebs. The boys stared at it in amazement. It looked complicated but also beautiful in its own way, like a heart that had been hurt but still kept beating. Their mother came in carrying a small broom. "What are you two doing?" she asked, though the smile tugging at her lips showed she already knew. "Fixing Baba's piano," Sami said proudly. "It's broken, but we'll make it better." She looked at them for a moment, her eyes soft and shining. "Then start with care," she said. "Your father always said that music begins with love." The boys took her words seriously. They cleaned around the piano, sweeping away broken glass and bits of plaster from the last explosion that had shaken the street. Sami even found a small wooden piece on the floor that he thought might belong to the piano's leg. "Look," he said, holding it up. "We can fix this part." Youssef smiled. "You're the builder, I'm the player." "Then we're a team," Sami replied, his grin bright despite the dust on his cheeks. For the rest of the morning, they worked together. Sami searched for anything that could help. Wires, nails, small tools left behind by neighbors. Youssef tested every key again and again, marking the ones that made sound. Slowly, the piano began to change. It didn't look new, but it looked cared for. And that was enough for now. When they finally sat down to rest, Youssef placed his fingers gently on the keys. He pressed one. It made a trembling, weak note. He pressed another, slightly stronger. Then another, and suddenly a soft melody began to form. It wasn't smooth, but it was full of feeling. Sami listened, eyes wide, and whispered, "That sounds like Baba's song." Youssef nodded without looking up. "I think it's the one he played on our birthday." The sound spread through the empty house, echoing softly off the broken walls. Their mother stopped what she was doing in the kitchen and leaned against the door frame. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't wipe them away. She wanted to remember this sound, the fragile, trembling music of hope. Outside, the street was quiet except for the hum of distant life. Someone fixing a roof. A woman calling her child, the wind stirring the dust. But when the boys played, the neighborhood seemed to pause. The melody wasn't perfect. Some notes cracked. Others faded. But it had something no instrument in the world could copy. The heartbeat of two children who refused to give up. Sami leaned close and whispered, "Do you think Baba can hear us now?" Youssef didn't stop playing. "I think he's listening," he said softly. They played until the sun dipped low, painting the room in orange and gold. Their hands were sore and their clothes were covered in dust, but their hearts felt lighter than they had in months. Each key they pressed felt like they were stitching together the pieces of their lost world. When evening came, their mother lit a candle and placed it near the piano. The small flame flickered, reflecting in the boys' eyes as they played their final notes. The sound blended with the quiet night air, reaching out through the window into the dark streets. It was a lullaby for the city, a message that said, "We are still here. We are still alive." Later, when they lay on their mattress under the cracked ceiling, Sami whispered, "The piano is still broken." Youssef turned to him and smiled. "So are we," he said gently. "But we're getting better." Sami thought for a moment, then closed his eyes. "Then tomorrow we'll fix more keys." Youssef nodded. "Tomorrow we make it sing." And as they drifted to sleep, the faint sound of the wind slipped through the room again, brushing the strings inside the piano. It made a soft, trembling note, a promise that the music would return, piece by piece, key by key. The next morning arrived with a pale light spreading across the gray ruins of Gaza. The air was dusty, but gentle, carrying the distant sounds of people rebuilding their shattered homes. Inside the small house, Youssef and Sami were already awake. They didn't need an alarm anymore. Hope was what woke them now. The piano stood waiting near the broken window, covered in new scratches but glowing faintly in the morning light. Sami rubbed his eyes and said, "Let's play again before the noise outside starts." Youssef nodded, already sitting on the wooden stool that wobbled slightly with every move. "Let's play something happy today," he said. The twins began to press the keys, starting with soft notes, testing which ones still worked. The sounds were not perfect. Some were sharp, others dull, but together they made something strangely beautiful. The melody climbed slowly, like the first steps of a bird learning to fly. Their mother, who was boiling tea nearby, stopped and listened. The sound filled the cracks in the walls, replacing the heavy silence that had once lived there. As the music grew, something magical began to happen. The neighbors who were walking by outside paused. They looked through the broken window and saw the two boys, small and serious, playing the piano with dust still in their hair. One man smiled sadly. "Those must be the teacher's sons," he whispered. Another woman holding a child by the hand said softly, "It sounds like their father's song." Soon more people stopped. Some leaned against the walls, others stood silently listening. The sound of the piano spread across the street like a memory returning home. Inside, Youssef closed his eyes while playing. He could almost feel his father's hand resting lightly on his shoulder, guiding him. Sami, sitting close, tapped his fingers on the broken keys, filling in the missing sounds with rhythm. "We sound good," he whispered. Youssef smiled faintly. "We sound alive." The boys played for hours. Sometimes they laughed when a key made a strange noise. Sometimes they stopped, closed their eyes, and started again. Their mother joined in by humming softly, her voice blending with the piano like sunlight through clouds. For a brief moment, their small home didn't feel broken. It felt full. By midday, the little concert had turned into a gathering. Children came closer, sitting on the dusty ground. A few clapped along, shyly at first, then with excitement. Someone offered the boys a bottle of water. An old man who used to know their father wiped his eyes. "He used to play like that," he said. "Exactly like that." Youssef looked up and said, "He taught us." Sami added proudly, "We're fixing the piano so it can make everyone happy again." The man smiled through his tears. "Then you're fixing more than the piano, little ones. You're fixing our hearts, fixing our hearts." When the sun began to lower, the twins stopped playing and looked at each other. Their hands were tired, but their faces glowed with pride. Their mother brought out some bread and fruit and invited the neighbors to share. For the first time in a long while, people were talking, laughing, and smiling together. It felt like the music had stitched the broken pieces of the community back together, even if just for one afternoon. Later, after everyone left, the boys sat in front of the piano again. The house was quiet, except for the soft rustle of wind outside. Sami traced the edge of a broken key. "Do you think Baba knows what we're doing?" Youssef looked toward the window where the last orange rays of sunlight fell. "I think he hears us," he said. "Maybe that's why the wind sounds different now." Their mother came to them and sat on the floor beside the piano. "Your father always said music can heal wounds that people cannot see," she said softly. "He would be proud to know you're keeping his promise." The boys didn't answer. They just sat there, staring at the piano, their link to the past, their weapon against despair. Outside, the first stars began to appear. The city around them was still broken, still scared. But in that small corner, something beautiful had been reborn. When it grew dark, they lit a candle and placed it on the piano. The flame flickered and cast long shadows on the wall, almost like the dancing figures of the family they once were. Sami began to hum again, and Youssef joined, pressing the softest keys. The sound was quiet, almost like a prayer. Through the night, their gentle music floated out into the streets, reaching ears that had grown used to explosions and sorrow. For those who listened, it was a reminder that even among rubble and ruins, beauty could still bloom. It reminded them that children still dreamed, that hearts still hoped, and that life still whispered softly, "I am not finished yet." And when Youssef and Sami finally went to sleep, the piano stood glowing faintly in the moonlight, its broken keys shining like scars that had learned to sing. Days turned into weeks, and the piano became the center of the twins' world. Each morning, Youssef and Sami would rush to it right after waking up, brushing away dust and checking if any new sound had appeared overnight. Their mother would watch them with a quiet smile, her heart full of both pride and worry. She knew that every note they played came from love, but also from pain, a pain too deep for children so young. One sunny afternoon, when the air outside was calm and the streets were filled with the sounds of rebuilding, something unexpected happened. A young woman who worked with a local aid group passed by their home. She stopped when she heard the faint music coming through the broken window, a shaky but soulful melody that floated between the cracks of the walls and into the street. She peeked inside and saw the two boys sitting side by side, their small hands moving carefully across the damaged keys. She didn't want to interrupt, so she took out her phone and quietly began to record. The way the sunlight touched the boys' faces, the way their eyes shone with focus, and the haunting, imperfect notes of the piano, it all told a story stronger than words. The video lasted only a minute, but when she posted it online that evening, it spread faster than she expected. By the next morning, hundreds of people had shared it. Within days, it reached thousands. The world was touched by the sight of two 8-year-old Gaza twins playing a broken piano in the middle of destruction, smiling despite everything. Comments poured in from people around the globe, teachers, artists, parents, even musicians. They play with more feeling than any concert pianist. "This is what hope sounds like. Please, someone help fix that piano." Youssef and Sami had no idea what was happening. To them, it was just another day. They played because it made them feel close to their father. They played because it made the sadness smaller. But when their mother came home one evening with her phone full of messages, she could hardly believe it herself. "Boys," she said softly, "people around the world have seen you." Sami blinked in surprise. "Seen us? Why?" "Because you played," she replied with a trembling smile. "Because you reminded them what courage looks like." The twins didn't fully understand. All they knew was that their father's piano, once forgotten and broken, was now speaking again, not just to them, but to the world. A week later, something remarkable happened. Volunteers from a local charity arrived at their door with tools and cleaning supplies. One of them smiled at the boys and said, "We saw your video. We're here to help fix the piano." The twins' eyes widened. Youssef looked at his brother, unsure if this was real. "You can fix it?" he asked quietly. The man nodded. "We'll try. But it already makes the most beautiful sound, because of you." For hours, the volunteers worked carefully, cleaning the inside of the piano, tightening loose strings, and polishing its cracked surface. The boys sat nearby, watching every move. It wasn't just an instrument anymore. It was a memory being restored, a heartbeat coming back to life. When the work was done, the piano looked almost new. The wood shone again, and most of the keys worked. The volunteers asked Youssef to try it. He hesitated, then pressed one note. The sound was clear, strong, and rich. It filled the entire room like sunlight spilling in after a storm. Sami clapped his hands, his eyes wide with joy. "It's alive again," he shouted. The volunteers smiled. One of them whispered, "No, it was never dead. It was just waiting for you." That night, the twins played their longest song yet. It wasn't one they learned from their father or from anyone else. It came from their hearts, and from every tear, every fear, and every small moment of love that had kept them going. Their mother sat on the floor, her face glowing in the candlelight, whispering a prayer of thanks. The next morning, the woman who had filmed them returned with more news. The video had reached musicians across the world, and many wanted to help. Some offered to send sheet music. Others promised to donate instruments for their school. But what touched everyone most was what the twins said when asked what they wanted. "We don't need new pianos just for us," Youssef said shyly. "Can you fix the ones at our school, so all the children can play?" That simple request melted hearts everywhere. It wasn't about fame or gifts. It was about sharing hope. People began donating not just money, but letters, drawings, and songs inspired by the twins. Across oceans, strangers were humming their melody. For the first time in years, the sound of piano keys echoed through Gaza's narrow streets again, not just from one house, but from many. Schools reopened their music rooms. Teachers wiped dust off old instruments and taught children to play. And through it all, Youssef and Sami kept returning to their piano. Every day they played for their father, for their mother, for their neighbors, and for a world that had remembered how to listen. In the evenings, when the streets grew quiet and the stars came out, their mother would whisper, "You've done something beautiful, my boys. You turned sadness into a song." The twins would smile at each other. Sami would say, "No, Mama. We just played the way Baba taught us and with our hearts." And somewhere in the wind, through the cracks of the city, it almost felt like their father's melody was playing along, strong, gentle, and endless, like hope itself. It had been weeks since the video of the twins playing their father's broken piano spread across the world, and Gaza had not felt the same since. The melody of Youssef and Sami had become something more than just a sound. It had become a story, a symbol of what could still survive even after everything else had fallen apart. Letters and messages began arriving from faraway places the boys had never heard of. Their mother read some of them aloud in the evenings. From Italy, she would say softly, smiling. From Canada, from India. Each letter carried the same message. Your music gave us hope. Musicians from other countries sent short videos of themselves playing the same broken tune on their own pianos. Some played it slowly, others added violins or flutes. But no matter the version, everyone called it the same thing, the Gaza Twins song. Youssef didn't quite understand how people so far away could hear something played on their tiny, cracked piano. "How can they listen to us from another world?" he asked one night. His mother smiled, tucking the blanket around him. "Because music doesn't need roads, Youssef. It travels through hearts." Sami laughed softly. "Then Baba must be the first one who heard us." Their mother nodded, her eyes glistening. "Yes, I think he was." Not long after, the aid group that had helped repair their piano came back, this time with cameras and microphones. They wanted to record the twins properly, to capture the sound that had touched so many. When the day came, their small home filled with people. There were sound engineers, volunteers, and neighbors watching through the window. Someone placed a soft cloth over the piano's lid and wiped it clean until it shone. Youssef sat on the stool, nervous but excited. Sami sat beside him, clutching his brother's hand. "Ready?" one of the men asked kindly. Youssef looked at Sami and whispered, "We'll play Baba's favorite." Sami nodded. "The one he said makes the sky smile." Then with trembling fingers they began. The first few notes were soft, uncertain, but as the melody grew, so did their confidence. The room filled with warmth, not just from the sound, but from the love inside it. Every note carried a piece of their story. Every note carried a piece of their story. The nights they hid under the table, the mornings they cleaned the piano, the laughter of their father echoing in memory. The cameraman stood frozen, tears in his eyes. The volunteers stopped talking. Even the children outside became quiet, listening. When the last note faded, the room stayed silent for a long time, as if no one wanted to break the spell. Finally, someone whispered, "That was perfect." A few weeks later, the recording appeared online. It was titled simply, "The Gaza Twins, Playing for Peace." The video began with the ruins of the city, then showed Youssef and Sami smiling shyly before their music filled the air. Within hours, it had millions of views. People commented things like, "They play with the strength of angels," and "This song makes me believe in kindness again." Famous musicians began talking about them. A pianist in Paris offered to send new sheet music. A school in Tokyo organized a small concert in their honor. A group of students in New York painted a mural of two boys sitting at a piano in a city of light. But when a reporter finally managed to speak to the twins through their local community center, their answers were simple and pure. "What would you like most now?" the reporter asked. Sami looked at his brother, then said quietly, "We want other children to have music too. Our school's pianos are broken. Maybe people can fix those instead." That one sentence melted hearts around the world. Donations began arriving, not for luxury, not for fame, but for joy. The twins' story inspired people to rebuild music rooms in schools, to donate instruments to children who had never touched one before. Weeks later, when the school finally reopened its small music hall, Youssef and Sami stood proudly beside their teacher. Rows of newly repaired pianos gleamed under the weak sunlight. The air smelled of fresh paint and hope. Their teacher smiled at them. "Would you like to play the first song?" The twins nodded and sat down side by side, just like they always did. Their classmates gathered around, some holding recorders, others clapping softly. When the first notes rang out, it was as if the entire city paused to listen again, to the sound of children playing, laughing, living. Their mother stood at the doorway, her hands clasped together, tears falling silently. For the first time since the war had taken her husband, she felt peace, not the kind that comes from quiet, but the kind that comes from love finding its way back through broken walls. That night, as the family sat under the stars, Sami said, "Do you think people will remember us forever?" Youssef looked at him thoughtfully. "Maybe not us," he said, "but maybe they'll remember our song." His mother smiled and added softly, "And maybe one day, another pair of children somewhere will play it. And remember that even in the darkest place, music can light the way." The wind picked up, brushing gently against the piano near the window. It made a faint trembling sound, almost like applause. The boys looked at each other and laughed. They didn't need the world to know their names because they already knew something greater. That when hearts listen, even the smallest song can echo across the earth. The sun rose over Gaza like a shy visitor, peeking through clouds of dust and smoke. But that morning felt different, lighter somehow, as if the air itself had learned how to breathe again. Inside the small house, the piano gleamed softly under the sunlight. Its wood was smooth once more, its keys shining like tiny white smiles. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive. Youssef and Sami stood before it, still unable to believe it was real. The volunteers had returned the day before with fresh wood, polished hammers, and strong strings. They had worked for hours while the twins watched, silent but glowing with excitement. The piano that had once been broken beyond hope now stood proudly waiting. Their mother came into the room, holding 2 small cups of warm tea. "You boys haven't stopped staring at that piano," she said with a soft laugh. Sami grinned. "It's like Baba's back." Youssef looked at the instrument, his eyes shining. "It even smells like him." Their mother smiled, setting the cups on the table. "Then maybe you should play a song." The twins looked at each other. That song, the one their father used to play every evening, had never sounded right on the damaged piano. Half the notes were missing, and the melody always felt incomplete, like a sentence cut short. But now, maybe it could be whole again. Sami climbed onto the stool first, patting the space beside him. "Come on," he said. "It's our turn." Youssef sat down, his small legs dangling just above the floor. He ran his fingers lightly over the keys. They felt smooth, strong, ready to speak. He took a deep breath. "Ready?" Sami nodded. "Always." And then they began to play. The first note was soft and pure, ringing through the small house like a drop of sunlight. The second note followed, then the third, and soon the melody began to bloom. The same tune their father used to play on quiet nights after dinner. The same tune that once made their mother hum and close her eyes. But this time it sounded different. It was fuller, richer, alive with both joy and sorrow. Every note carried a story, and of dust and loss and love that refused to die. Their mother leaned against the doorway, tears gathering in her eyes. The sound filled every crack in the walls, every scar in the ceiling. Neighbors outside heard it too. The same people who had once gathered to listen when the piano was broken now stood quietly in the street. A man carrying bread stopped mid-step. A child tugged at his mother's sleeve. One by one they came closer, drawn by the melody that flowed like water over stones. Through the broken window the music spilled into the streets. The air shimmered with it, bright, honest, real. It wasn't the polished perfection of a concert hall. It was something more human. It was a song born from ashes, played by small hands that had known too much loss but still chose to sing. When the last note finally lingered in the air, Youssef let his hands rest on the keys. The house fell silent except for the faint hum of the strings fading away. He looked at Sami, who was smiling through tears. "We did it," Sami whispered. Youssef nodded. "No, he did it. Baba helped us." Their mother stepped forward and placed a hand on their shoulders. "He's smiling right now," she said softly. "I can feel it." As the crowd outside began to applaud quietly, the boys turned toward the window. The people of their street, old men, mothers, children, were standing there clapping, some wiping their eyes. A woman whispered, "The teacher's music lives again." That evening, the local volunteer who had shared their first video returned, holding a small camera. "Can I record this?" she asked. "People should see what hope looks like when it's real." Youssef smiled shyly. "Only if you stay to listen," she laughed. "I wouldn't miss it." So she filmed as the twins played once more, the repaired piano shining in the soft light, the flicker of candles reflecting in their eyes, the sound of their laughter mixing with the keys. Later that night, the video was posted online again. This time it wasn't called The Gaza Twins Playing a Broken Piano. It was titled The Gaza Twins, The Repaired Melody. Within hours, people from around the world began watching. They saw not just the music, but the courage behind it, the resilience of two small boys who turned grief into grace. Comments poured in again. "This isn't just music. This is rebirth. Their father must be proud beyond words." From the ruins, they built a song. Back home, the boys didn't know any of that yet. They were lying on their mattress under the cracked ceiling, the moonlight spilling across the piano nearby. Sami turned to his brother and whispered, "Do you think Baba can hear us now?" Youssef smiled sleepily. He never stopped. Outside, the wind blew gently through the ruins, carrying a faint echo of their song, a tune that refused to fade. In the heart of Gaza, where silence had once ruled, music now flowed freely again. The piano, once broken and forgotten, had become something sacred, not just wood and wire, but a heartbeat, a reminder that even after the darkest nights, something beautiful can still be played. And in that moment, the whole city seemed to hum softly with them, a repaired melody, with them, a repaired melody, a song of resilience, a whisper of love that would never die. The night had fallen softly over Gaza, covering the broken streets in silver light. The wind carried the faint scent of dust and the sea, moving gently through narrow alleys where laughter and sorrow lived side by side. Inside their small house, the piano stood quietly by the window, its surface reflecting the moon. The same piano that once sat silent and broken was now the heartbeat of a story that had reached the world. Youssef and Sami sat side by side on the wooden stool, their fingers resting on the cool keys. The world outside had changed since they first brushed away the dust months ago. The neighbors smiled more now. Children played again in the streets, sometimes humming the boys' melody as they chased one another. Music had returned, not just to their home, but to the hearts of everyone who had listened. Their mother sat in the corner, sewing by candlelight. She looked up every few minutes, watching her sons in quiet pride. They were growing taller, stronger, but she could still see the same light in their eyes and the same one their father had. Every time they played, it felt like he was in the room again, sitting right beside them, smiling that calm, kind smile. Youssef pressed a few keys softly, letting the sound drift through the air. "Do you think Baba can really hear us, Mama?" he asked, his voice tender. She paused, her needle still between her fingers. "I think," she said slowly, "that when you play, he doesn't just hear you. He plays with you." Sami smiled at that. "Then we should play something new, something that belongs to all of us." The boys looked at each other and nodded. They began to improvise, not their father's old song this time, but a new one, built from everything they'd lived through. The melody rose and fell like breathing. Some notes were bright with joy, others deep with memory. Together they told a story without words, a story of love, loss, courage, and rebirth. The music poured out into the night. It slipped past the window, across the sleeping city, and into the ears of anyone still awake. A mother rocking her baby hummed along. A group of boys sitting on a rooftop looked toward the sound, smiling. Even the old man who used to listen from the corner of the street wiped his eyes and whispered, "They're still playing." When the last note faded, the twins sat in silence. The only sound left was the steady hum of the wind brushing against the piano strings, creating a ghostly echo that seemed to whisper back to them. Their mother spoke softly. "This song you play, it's not just yours anymore. It belongs to everyone who needs to remember that hope can survive anything." Sami tilted his head. "Even war." "Even war," she said firmly. "Because love doesn't burn. It only waits." In the days that followed, more messages came from around the world. People shared stories of how the twins' music had changed something in them. How they picked up old instruments again. How they forgave. How they found the strength to rebuild. Some wrote poems. Others sent recordings of their children playing the same melody. One message came from a famous composer who promised to create a full symphony inspired by the Gaza twins' song. But for Youssef and Sami, none of that mattered as much as the simple things. Their mother's smile, the laughter of neighbors outside, and the piano that still glowed softly every morning. They didn't dream of fame or stages. They dreamed of peace, of a world where every child could wake to music instead of sirens. One evening, their teacher invited them to perform at a small gathering for the community. The event was held in the rebuilt school courtyard. Strings of paper lanterns hung from the walls, flickering in the cool breeze. When it was their turn, the crowd went silent. Youssef and Sami walked to the front hand in hand and sat down at the old school piano that had been repaired thanks to them. Youssef looked up at the sky, where the stars shone like tiny notes on a black sheet of music. "This one," he said softly, "is for everyone who still believes." And together they began to play. The music rose gently, filling the courtyard. It was the same tune they had created that night at home, a song of resilience. But this time, it was stronger, carried by dozens of children humming along by their mother's tears, by every heart that had suffered and healed. When the final note came, the audience stood in silence. Then slowly they began to clap. It wasn't loud or wild. It was gentle, respectful, full of emotion. Some smiled, others cried. And above it all, Youssef and Sami smiled at each other. Not because of applause, but because they knew the truth. Their father's song had never ended. It had only changed, grown, multiplied. It now lived in every ear that had listened, in every hand that touched a piano, in every person who dared to hope again. That night, as they walked home under the stars, Sami said softly, "Do you think songs can live forever?" Youssef thought for a long moment before answering. "Only the true ones," he said. "The ones born from love." Back inside their little house, the piano stood by the window, waiting quietly for tomorrow. The moonlight fell across its keys, making them shimmer like a smile. And when the wind passed through, it made the faintest sound, a gentle echo of their father's music, reminding the world that even when everything else fades, the song of the heart never dies.